Hello everyone, Veigar 2 here. MF got changed this patch and I want to make a video about it because a lot of people are asking me what I think about MF now and I don't want to reply to everybody asking it, so I'd rather make a video about it. I actually have gotten Challenger on bot lane. It's just I don't advertise this because I played mages mainly. So it's a kind of bit cheating in my opinion because I played mages my entire life. I'm not that great at playing ADCs, but I can still climb to high elo playing ADCs, especially Misfortune. Misfortune is and was one of my most played ADCs when I did play a lot of bot lane. And I like MF because she's very versatile. You can do so many different builds and runes on her. And this patch doesn't really change that. So I'm going to talk about every single change and what it means and why I think MF is a great champion in draft. For solo queue especially. So the Q change, basically AD ratio and AP ratio doesn't get changed, which means that the scaling doesn't matter based on your build. Your build is not going to affect this anymore, whereas some of the others it will. So the physical damage stays at the same at rank 1, which means if you max E, you're not going to benefit from this buff. But as you put points into Q, you see that the extra 20 damage here, which can also be more if you kill something with your Q, it's gonna add up, especially on a spammable ability. So that's not bad, it's good change. This is also nice, especially when you think about the fact that you get attack speed and also that the attack speed also got a bit higher, 10% each rank. So this obviously showcases that they want to push her into more on-hit. So why do I think MF is great in draft? MF is great in draft because she can go on-hit with crit, she can also go lethality, and she can also go hybrid with Liandry's. The thing is, MF with PTA is really great versus champions like Kai'Sa, champions like Lucian. When enemy can force themselves onto you and force you to have to fight them, PTA gains value. When you can walk up to somebody and hit them, PTA gets value. In these lanes, most of the time, assuming a good level of play, right? So no Draven missing axes, no Saya wasting her feathers. Assuming there's two humans playing, MF shouldn't go PTA in these type of lanes. Unless she has a support that can enable her to hit, right? If your Pyke hooks and it's going to be a fist fight, PTA will be good. But if you have a Nami, PTA will not be good. If you have a fucking Seraphine, PTA will not be good. You want to play with range. You want to get them low so they can't engage on you guys. This has not changed. So that's what you have to think about when you look at these changes. There's nothing to talk about with the W change. The W change is just amazing. It's buff for both builds. This is just great. So we have to think about this one. This one is the same at rank 1 and it's stronger at rank 1 because of this as well. It's weaker in damage here, but this is way more important than this is. So crit build is just flat out giga buffed. But some games, crit build is just not playable. That's what you need to understand. So yes, they did make this 4 seconds longer cooldown. That is true. But it is still better to do Emax versus some lanes than it is to do the Qmax PTA. That's what people need to understand with these changes. You're forced to play a worse Comet Emax MF in some matchups because it's just not playable to go PTA every game unless you're just significantly better than your opponent. But this isn't all that bad. Very often when you are playing MF and you are playing versus team comps like this, you want to go Liandry's. I've been a big fan of Liandry's on MF. I played it a lot. I talked to a lot of pro players with it. It even got played in the LCS by Danny from EG. And it's great. And these changes, if you go Liandry's on MF, you don't care about these nerfs. Having 4 seconds more cooldown when you're going Liandry's build doesn't matter nearly as much as when you are playing the Eclipse build. If you go Eclipse build, you're purely going Emax really for lane and early mid game. But if you're doing Liandry's build, you're doing Emax because you have Liandry's. So, this 30 damage but then you get 20% AP ratio to try to stabilize it, it ends up with the damage change not being so bad. This scaling with AP doesn't matter because you're only gonna build Liandry's for AP. So this won't change. This is just more for fun on ARAMs. So you have 50% slow now, which is nice. This means also for lane, your R is probably gonna hit one extra wave, because here you had like lower slow. Not for the Comet Emax, I'm talking like for crit, because this is of course flat. Once you get to this point before on Emax, obviously this would be more slow. So for Liandry's, 4 seconds extra cooldown doesn't matter that much because you have so much cooldown reduction, you will still be able to spam your E. Of course it's a nerf, yes, it's a nerf, but it is not as big of a deal as people think. So what's my conclusion of all these changes? Nothing. Basically, I think that you should go Comet Emax in the same cases that you would before, and that is just slightly worse. And then you should go Crit MF in the cases that you would have went Crit MF before, but it's going to be so much better. Which means that if you blind pick MF, she's going to be great no matter what. Now, obviously, yes, if you go blind pick MF, the enemy can quickly end up with a team comp like this, and it might end up being a bit cringe to play. But that is blind picking almost every ADC, right? There are maybe some ADCs that could play this, but then they lock in other champs and then Ezreal becomes bad, right? That's just the nature of blind picking something. And MF does not need to go a seal item, and this means that she's very versatile in her builds, because if I see a team comp like this, I can easily go Kraken into Bloodthirster and have a massive shield, and then I can, for example, go into IE, and then I can just go tank items. And this build makes the tank build even better as well, because the AD ratio hasn't changed. It's just base damage, and then 10% extra attack speed for fun. So yeah, MF is going to be easier to blind. She's not going to be punishing enemy Saya blind pick as much as before, that is true, but she will still win these matchups, I believe, because the nature of why you're doing Emax hasn't changed. You're maxing E, you're slowing the Draven, he cannot auto attack because he can't get in range. This has not changed. 10% less slow on max rank is not going to make the enemy Draven get into range. This 30 damage, assuming you hit every single tick, which isn't realistic, so it's not actually 30 damage, is not going to make the matchup bad. So I think MF is great. MF is going to be in a great spot, and it's also going to make stuff like MF Yumi, which is a very fine combo. It's going to make it even better. This is one of those times where MF wants to go PTA, despite being with a range champ, and then just becoming a carry. And this is great. So since the PTA build is so much better now from these buffs, I'm going to talk about matchups that I like to play that build into. So, champions that are going to force themselves onto you, like Kai'Sa Lucian, I believe PTA is very good against. There will be always a time versus Kai'Sa that she ults and forces you to fight her. If you have PTA, you can actually win. Level 1, if you proc PTA and you can run them down with W, you can actually like win level 1 fights with MF. So she's very strong in these cases. The worst type of matchups for MF is like Jhin type of things, because versus Jhin, obviously PTA doesn't make sense, but Comet Emax also feels bad because the guy goes Swiftness boots and has 4 potions very often and Fleet, so he has a lot of sustain and a lot of wave clear, so you can't really poke him down. Versus other hyper carries like Jinx, in my opinion you will still do Emax, but since lane is really easy, you can do PTA, it depends how the rest of her team comp looks. So if it's like Jinx with like a fucking Seraph, right, and they want to play like long range, I would do Comet. But if it's like Jinx, and then they have other champions that are forcing themselves onto me, right, or tanks and stuff, then yes, I would go PTA even though it's a bit worse versus my lane. The way you should be viewing it now, I think, is that if you can get away with PTA in your lane and it's good versus their comp, you should go PTA. But if you will be a bot for the first 15 minutes of the game, if you go PTA, then you should still go Emax, even though it's slightly nerfed. Some team comps just cannot play versus Emax MF. Like, if you look at something like this, they just cannot play the game. They just can't. They don't do anything. They don't walk up. Especially in coordinated play, like competitive. If your teammates allows you to control zones with E and R, these champions cannot play the game. So what would I build on MF? If I'm doing Combat Emax, and I feel like we need AP damage, or I feel like enemy team suffers from Leandri's bleed, so basically they don't have any ways to really heal up or shield the poke, then I think Leandris is really good. If they do have ways to shield or heal the poke, and I'm doing Emax, I think that you should go Eclipse, and you should build items like Serpent's Fang. Sometimes I don't even go Muramana because I think Serpent's Fang's second item is needed. For example, if they have champions like Seraphine, Karma, Senna, Team Comp, then I want Serpent's Fang. The Kraken Slayer build, like I said, you don't go Seal on MF, which opens up a lot of items. So we're gonna look at items, and I'm gonna tell you every single item that MF can buy. There's a lot of items. So, if you're going PTA build, Kraken Slayer is great on MF, because you can easily proc Kraken on MF. So, on Mythics, Eclipse is good on MF some games, Leandris is good some games, Shieldbow is rarely good. There are some team comps I would go Shieldbow against when it's just like really unplayable for you. You have no peel and they have like triple assassins. I think you can go Shieldbow. But 95% of the time I would go Kraken Slayer. So Kraken is going to be your first item on PTA MF. Moving into legendary items, second item I very often go Bloodthirster. Reason being is MF is really easy to access and reach if she's playing PTA build. So Bloodthirster with your passive, you heal so much, you get a huge shield to help you live, and you lifesteal so much in fights. Especially if you're being dove by like 2 people, you can hit one guy, reset your passive between both, and you will lifesteal so fucking crazy amount. It also gives you crit, which leads you into a very easy choice third item, IE. So, that's basically my 3 item core every PTA game. Kraken into Bloodthirster into IE. I wouldn't really go away from this. The only time I would ever change this is if I would go like LDR second item instead of BT, which would just be the case if they are tanky. I will need Bloodthirster less because they don't deal much damage, they don't have much poke, and I would need LDR more. There are some funny items you can go on MF, like Essence Reaver. This is not too bad damage-wise, but it's just really troll to buy in my opinion, because if they are not tanky and you buy ER, you probably would have needed Bloodthirster, so I would have just went Bloodthirster. Now, once you move into 4 and 5th and whatever item, things gets interesting, because at this point you have 60% crit and you deal a fuck ton of damage. So your 4th item is going to be LDR if you haven't bought it. If you've already bought LDR, you can go BT, or you can buy other items that you might need in that particular game. Like, for example, Maw might be needed some games. You know, maybe you need a QSS. I like to buy items like Randuin's or Anathema's Chains later, once I'm like building my last item. Just because if I have 80% crit, I'm probably going to crit no matter what. So buying the last 20% isn't really worth it for me compared to like just winning, right? Like if I'm alive as MF, like I said, you lifesteal so much. You really have to play MF 3 games to really understand how much MF lifesteals with Bloodthirster and her passive. It's really crazy the amount of lifesteal you get. So let's say they have 1 threat on me, right? And my build is Kraken, BT, IE, right? And then let's say I go, for example, LDR, or I go, let's say, Collector if it's needed, right? like if LDR is bad. Like I go collector second item, and then I go, for example, IE into BT fourth. And then I'm like, okay, well, they have a Kiana who's fed. I just buy Anaphemas, and I know that sounds crazy. But if you buy Anaphemas and you put it on Kiana, I promise you, you will tank her entire combo, and then just hit her 2 times, and you are lifestealed up to half HP again. So yeah, that's how I think you should build MF. And thank you for watching.